Hello again, I am Darkness Among Us, and today we will be talking about the Ghoul, Dead by Daylight's latest licensed chapter, and all of the hubbub surrounding it. Let's get into it. Let's start by addressing the issues that people have with the killer. Ken has extremely high mobility, which allows him to traverse the map quickly and easily. This allows him to control generators quickly and easily. Ken can also punish dropped shack pallets and other such strong loops. This makes it incredibly difficult to figure out more conventional counterplay that would otherwise work on other killers. Ken has a form of crowd control. Now, if any of you were aware of a panel that happened a long time ago, one of the things that was brought up in said panel was that players hate being crowd controlled or being forced to be immobile for any amount of time. I believe specifically what was referenced was binding. This means that things like exhaustion perks don't work at all. Balanced landing, sprint burst, lithe, these things do not work against him because the moment he hits you with his ability, you waste the entire timer. Deep Wound is relatively easy to apply. Now, if you're any player of Legion, or if you watch my streams and you know that I'm a player of Legion, you know that this isn't necessarily a new thing, but the consistency in which Ken can apply it is definitely new, and it gives him a lot of micro-control over chases. It also invalidates styptics and syringes in every single chase. Vaulting pallets is quick and easy. You can come right out of a vault in enraged mode and almost hit the survivor within seconds. Getting hit behind walls feels bad, and yes, it does. Because of how the hit registry works on this killer, oftentimes the survivor will find themselves rounding a corner and then having deep wound inflicted on them anyways. Next, we will get on to addressing the proposed solutions by the community, i.e. shit I saw on Reddit by people who aren't actually interested in solutions. Increased cooldowns. Now, you shouldn't do this. Anybody who's played Ken knows that the bounds and leaps for his power already have quite the girthy cooldown. It doesn't feel that way to survivors because you can chain consecutive leaps. But I feel like his power is already, 5 to 7 seconds? Something along those lines. Maybe that seems a little short for high mobility, but consider how long it takes Nurse for her to get her blinks back. Reduced hit reticle. This isn't by itself a terrible idea, but it would need to be done by itself because you would be drastically increasing the amount of skill needed to effectively play this killer, and you just kind of turn him into another Nurse. Grabs can't hit behind or around walls. This is the change I see proposed the most often, and I think it lacks foresight. It also lacks consideration for its consequences. So what happens is, if you change how this works, and say he grabs you while you're rounding a corner, but you've already moved from beyond the corner, you either have to do what he's doing now, and that is stop you just immediately where you stand and take the deep wound out, or the two alternatives being you get pulled into his attack range, since the game has already registered that he did it right. And that feels even worse because now you're not just being crowd controlled, you're being crowd controlled backwards. Or he gets pulled into your range and around that corner, leaving him into even better positioning to consecutively hit you or teammates. Both of them look worse and both of them feel worse. Reduced grab distance. And I know people don't want to hear this, but it hurts the more fun aspects of the killer. Blight and Nurse still have the same mobility or higher even to this day. And I know that people also don't like hearing the same Blight and Nurse comparisons since they're S-tier killers, but this is how it has to be, since those are the two most mobile killers in the entire game. Diminishing free-form mobility is another form of double standards on behavior's unlicensed killers. I know we don't need another Blight and Nurse, but the way I see it, if Kaneki gets his mobility reduced, then they should too. And to be honest with you, it might even be better for the game if we finally take them off their pedestals. Reworking certain add-ons. Due to lack of sufficient experience on this killer, I can't really comment. I've only played a few matches of Kaneki, and I barely used any add-ons. Most of the builds I used were action speed builds, so Brutal Strength, Fire Up, Bamboozle. Perk synergy. This is a terrible idea, because it disproportionately affects killers. Yes, Ken can be very oppressive with Deadlock, Deadman Switch, Pain Resonance, and other such things. But the stronger killers always are. Weaker killers use these things to compete on a more even playing field with stronger killers. And, of course, stronger survivors. The issue is never the killer using the perks. The issue is the perks disproportionately affecting the killers. My proposed solutions. Wait a couple of weeks to see if counterplay develops. Everyone has knee-jerk reactions to new killers regardless of their strength, such as Pyramid Head, Dredge, Houndmaster, Dracula. People did not like going against these killers when they were launched. And granted, Pyramid Head and Dracula both saw nerfs after their launch, but they both saw somewhat of a buff after their launch as well. In the case of Pyramid Head, yes, he couldn't see the auras of his cages anymore, and they began to relocate, so he couldn't just camp them. But in return, his punishment attack has seen a dramatic decrease in its cooldown. If no counterplay develops by the end of the period, you can go ahead and reduce the hit reticle as needed. Now, I know that there are potential bugs regarding how it works. Sometimes when people say that they were hit behind walls, they mean literally behind walls, not just around a corner like I mentioned earlier. People brought up that he hit them through a wall because they were hugging a wall that he was on the other side of. This shouldn't happen, but this is also a bug and should be fixed anyway. So, yeah, diminishing the hit reticle should be done separate of that. That should just be a bug that's fixed. Address problematic add-ons. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I am in no state to talk about which add-ons are problematic, but his base kit is already strong, so I don't think most add-ons would need base kit balancing. So, you know how sometimes with killers, they will increase an aspect of their base kit, but diminish an aspect of one of the add-ons that everybody was using all the time. They've done this for many killers, and I think Legion is one of the most recent examples where Mural Sketch was divided into a slightly weaker add-on but a slightly stronger base kit, which is good. As a Legion main, I love this. Add a bigger delay after vaulting pallets into an M1. Now, this isn't necessarily a terrible idea, but know that as I'm getting further down this list of proposed changes, I am less in favor of them. Wesker is already a killer that does this. He can vault pallets using his power, but the problem is he has a very short range and a very short time period where he hits survivors who are just attempting to camp the pallet. I suggest that for both Kaneki and Wesker, the timing be increased, and in Kaneki's case during enraged mode, to prevent pallet camping. So if a survivor is hugging the other side of a pallet, but walks just the right amount of distance away, make it so that the amount of time it would take for them to cross that distance back and vault the pallet they would get hit if they tried to do it too soon. I want this to be more punished, basically. It's always been one thing that has irritated me with Wesker specifically, and it's kind of come back with Kaneki, but Kaneki's less forgiving with the timing, so it hurts survivors more often. A bigger delay after the dash into the M1. And I reiterate, the further we get down this list, the less I'm willing to suggest these. But if some nerfs have to be done, then some nerfs have to be done. Keep in mind, to bring up the Wesker comparison again, Wesker already has a very long time after he vaults a pallet using his power before he can M1. It's somewhat short, but it's long enough for the survivor to potentially make it to another resource, especially if they're using live. Wesker's also has a much bigger delay than Kaneki, especially for enraged mode, where after you vault a pallet you can M1 almost immediately. So yes, after dashing or after vaulting, maybe add a bigger delay before you can M1. And I am proposing this for both, but dashing less so than vaulting. In closing, I understand that people already are sick of going against the new killer, the Ghoul. I understand it can be unfun to be yeeted from across the hallway and inflicted with deep wound, and knowing that now you can't just continue holding W down every single hallway into everything ever. But such is the nature of high mobility killers, and high mobility will always be king in this game. Depriving survivors of their mobility, or depriving killers of their mobility, is the strongest thing that one side can do. And it will always be the strongest thing that one side can do. Nurse and Blight are the two most mobile killers in the game, and that's why they're S tier. Kaneki is potentially really high A tier, maybe S tier themselves right now. Because they can cross the map in short times, just like the other two. They can suppress gens in short times, just like the other two. And they can inflict injuries in short times, just like the other two. Extremely high macro and micro pressure, only exponentialized further through perks and add-ons. But people also have problems acclimating, so give it some time. Maybe give it a couple of more weeks. Another thing to consider is that behavior overtuned this killer before launch because PTB bugs made testing insufficient. Everybody was saying Ken Kaneki would maybe be a B tier killer in the PTB. Turns out, no. Way higher. Way higher. So, it was possibly a miscommunication. This is kind of what the PTB is for, but also kinda not what the PTB is for. And speaking of the PTB, one thing that everybody wanted from the PTB was for the slide add-on to become base kit. Now it is, and now the add-on that gave slide has been changed to be reducing slide by 50%. I can't imagine why you'd ever use this. One thing you could potentially do is reduce the slide, but then change the add-on to bring it back to this standard. But, I don't know. That might just be too far in nerfing mobility, which is what I brought up that I was against earlier. There is one last thing. It's possible that Ken Kaneki is just the latest in a trend where you release a killer in an overtuned state to acquire as many sales as possible, and then nerf them into a balanced state later, but in Behavior's case, it tends to be nuking the killers, especially if they're licensed, not counting Skull Merchant. It is a smarter business strategy to do this, because it gives players the illusion of power creep and power fantasy, but it is a harder development strategy, and it hurts the killer's reputation. It would be easier from a development standpoint to release them in an underpowered state and then gradually creep them upwards into a balanced state, rather than release them into an overpowered state and creep them downwards, or in Behavior's case, nuke them downwards. But that'll be all. Thank you all for watching, if indeed you still are. Be sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more. Let me know what you think down in the comments below, and be good people.